Tensions are mounting in Eastern Europe, where more than 100,000 Russian troops are deployed at Ukraine's border. Imtiaz Tyab shows us how the country is preparing for a possible invasion.
They may be outgunned and outmanned, but the Ukrainian military says, if forced, it will fight. This tank unit is running tactical drills near the Russian border. But Ukrainian forces will need more than anti-tank units to face Russia's military might.
The weak point of Ukrainian military is the air.
Ukrainian Army veteran Yuri Zabanatsky says Ukraine lacks the ability to track and intercept the tactical missiles in Russia's arsenal.
And all the Ukrainian territory is in range of those missiles deployed in Belarus, Crimea, and Russia.
This is a nation that knows war. In Kyiv, the memory wall of the fallen defenders stretches as long as a city block.
For 8 long years, Ukrainian forces have been battling Russian-backed separatists in the east, claiming 14,000 lives.
As the threat of an invasion continues to hang over this city, President Vladimir Putin's plans may be more about extracting concessions than triggering a major military conflict, says Russian military analyst Alexander Bonov.
The fear of the war is a working political instrument to make Russian demands and Russian concerns to be listened to.
Now, in some ways, Vladimir Putin has what he wants: world powers negotiating his security demands to prevent war. But the risk in this coercive diplomacy is that if Russia doesn't gain something soon, it may feel it has to use force to not look weak. Anne-Marie, Vlad.
Imtiaz, thank you very much. Let's get into this with Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, who's joining us now from Washington. Admiral, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you about something that you said yesterday. You said that there was still time and space for diplomacy with Russia. As you just heard from our Imtiaz Tyab, who's there, Putin does have what he wants, which is the entire world paying attention and waiting for his next move. So how much time is left to de-escalate this situation?
Well, that's really hard to say, and I think only Mr. Putin can answer that really accurately. But he does have an opportunity here. That is absolutely true, to follow through on his promises of, A, not invading Ukraine again, and 2, seeking a diplomatic path forward. So it was good to see him talk to President Macron. What we'd like to see is for him to continue to talk to us and to the rest of the world community about how to de-escalate this situation. And quite frankly, Vlad, he can go a long way just by removing some of those troops from the border. But what we're seeing is the opposite. Even over just the last 48 hours, he has continued to add armed forces and capabilities around Ukraine and in Belarus.
So let's talk about that. Russia says they have 6 warships headed to the Black Sea for drills. Why do we think those ships are headed in that direction?
Well, I mean, the obvious assumption that you can make from this is that he is continuing to add to his capability in case he wants to pursue a military action. So these ships are, in some cases, they're landing ships, ships that are designed to put troops ashore. So all of that, again, just further points to the possibility that he intends to do some sort of military action in Ukraine. Again, what scale and when, we don't know. But this is just another indication that he continues to create options for himself should he choose to further invade.
So, Admiral, let me just ask you a question about sort of what would look like a win for Vladimir Putin. In other words, he's done this. He's amassed these troops on Ukraine's border. The entire world is paying attention. But for him to de-escalate the situation, he obviously needs to go back to the Russian people and say, we got something out of this, right? What would that look like just from your point of view?
Well, look, I mean, at the diplomatic table, we've been very frank with him. In fact, very honest about some of the things that we'd be willing to negotiate with the Russians about, in terms of the offensive missile capabilities on the continent, in terms of scale and size of U.S. military operations and exercises. We've been willing to do all of that and discuss all those things with him with an air of reciprocity. In other words, he would have to do some of that as well. So, I mean, I think, again, it's hard to say exactly what's in his mind. I mean, only he can answer that question. We do know that he has on many occasions, in fact, proven it in 2014, that he has designs on Ukrainian territory, but he also has designs on NATO. He would like to see NATO divided. He would like to see NATO weak. He would like to see NATO further away from his western flank. But ironically, what he's doing is exactly the opposite. We now see NATO more united. We now see NATO allies, including the United States, willing to put more capabilities onto NATO's eastern flank and his western flank. So in a way, he's getting exactly what he says he doesn't want.
You know, if the push for diplomacy works and there are some concessions made for Vladimir Putin, what's to stop him from doing this again in a few years? You know, he was able to successfully annex Crimea. What if he gets something out of this episode now, and then, 4 years from now, we see something else?
Well, it's hard to say what the future would look like. I want to just make one point. We're not talking about concessions to Vladimir Putin. We're talking about reciprocal moves to build trust and confidence, to try to de-escalate the tension from here. Now, what could stop him from doing this in the future? I don't know. I mean, the idea would be, if we could find a diplomatic path forward here, would be to not have to be in this situation 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Admiral, let me switch subjects here and ask you about the raid last week in Syria, where the United States successfully took out a leader of ISIS. But as you know, as has been reported, there were civilian casualties during the raid. Do you have some new information to share about those civilian casualties?
No, we don't. As you know, and we're still doing an after action on this. And as Secretary Austin said, we're certainly willing to take a look to see if there's any possibility that any U.S. action in that raid might have caused civilian harm. Right now, all the indications are that those civilians who were harmed, those innocents, were harmed by Mr. Abdullah himself and by his lieutenant on the second floor. Again, we're willing to take a look at this. I'm not trying to be absolutist, but every indication we have so far is that those who were killed were killed at the hand of Mr. Abdullah and his lieutenant, and the actions that they took that day to fight back. I would remind two things. One, that the president ordered a raid on the ground specifically because we wanted to minimize civilian harm. We knew that there was an innocent family on the first floor that we were able to evacuate safely from that building. And number two, when the special operators got on scene, there was a good 10 minutes of calling out with a bullhorn to encourage everybody in that building, including Mr. Abdullah, to leave peacefully and quietly without any violence. I mean, we made every effort we could to try to minimize the use of force in conducting this raid. Unfortunately, Mr. Abdullah chose another path, a cowardly path of self-destruction, and he took many lives with him.
Before we let you go, can you tell us anything about the F-35 crash in the South China Sea? I know the crash is being investigated, but also the leaked video is being investigated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've seen the video, too. I don't want to get ahead of the Navy's investigation. Every time there's a mishap of this nature, certainly one like this, that they're going to fully investigate it. They'll figure out what happened. Thank goodness that all those crew members, including the pilot, are in stable condition now. Nobody was killed and nobody too seriously hurt. That's good news. They will investigate the mishap, figure out what happened so that we can learn from it, make sure it doesn't happen again, or at least try not to let it happen again. And as for the video, I know the Navy's investigating that too. That was official video taken of the flight deck during flight operations, not meant for public consumption. Certainly is going to be used in the investigation itself into the mishap. And I know the Navy will get to the bottom of that, or how that got out into the public.
And Admiral, real quick, is the Navy going to recover that aircraft? I know there's been some concern about that.
They are conducting recovery operations as we speak. That aircraft is important to our inventory. I mean, even though it was destroyed in this accident, and we want to get it back. So again, so we can learn from this mishap. The aircraft itself is a significant piece of evidence. So the Navy is working on recovery operations right now, and I'll let them speak for the process and how long it's going to take. But it's not uncommon for us to want to recover aircraft that have been lost at sea.
Admiral John Kirby, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks,
Good to be
Admiral.
with you.